Yes, the apparent veiling of the face of God is in us. It's our thoughts and feelings and judgments and preferences and ideas and that make it possible for us to see the face of God in those people, objects or activities that coincide with our conditioning, and make it almost impossible for us to see the face of God in those people, ideas, activities, objects that don't coincide with our conditioning. In other words, what we are able to see the face of God in is coloured by our preferences, our likes, our dislikes, our attitudes, etc. So think more clinically about God. By which I mean this. Do you see that everything there is exists? If you have a thought, the thought exists. If the sound of my voice, if I'm speaking, the sound of my voice exists. These flowers exist. The sensation of your hands on the mic exists. The pheasants exist. These loud men with their loud voices and their cruel thoughts exist. Yes? Everything there is exists. So, existence is the one thing that is shared by everything. Take the cruelest thought you could imagine having. When that thought is present, it exists. Take the kindest thought you could imagine having. When that thought is present, it exists. So existence is shared by everything and everyone. So what is existence? What is that is shared by everyone and everything? And now imagine taking existence away from a thought, from a person, from a feeling. What would remain? Nothing. Now, could it be that existence is what is meant by God? That which is shared equally by all things, by all people, and that which, when taken away, turns out to be the entirety of that object. In other words, I'm trying to direct you towards a concept of God that is not just in line with your own
preferences,
personal feelings and preferences and conditioning.
But you know very well that I completely want to see grace in other than beauty. So I'm
giving you a direct way of seeing that existence is the common factor in everything, and therefore it cannot be limited by any particular thing, because it is shared by all things. Therefore it must be unlimited.
Yeah. Okay. So in that poem that says, I am in the refugee who escapes from the pirate who raped her, I'm also the rapist. I am that. So if that is in everything that exists, as you are telling me, I have to, well, we have to accept and that all of that is the face of God, or it is all existence, and the judgment that rises up is through my own conventional attitudes. But sometimes when you find something unspeakable, you want to do something about it.
Yes, you are trying to take an idea, everything is the face of God, and superimpose it on your experience, which is actually saying, no, this is not the face of God. And you're trying to persuade yourself that something horrific is the face of God. You're trying to impose an idea that you've heard and that you intuit is true onto something which actually you don't feel is true. You do not feel the rapist is the face of God, or the pheasant shooter, but you're trying to superimpose an idea onto your feeling. I'm trying to give you your own experiential access, not by superimposing an idea onto your experience, but I'm actually trying to give you access in your own experience to the recognition of what it is in everyone and everything that is considered to be God.
And that is existence.
Yes, or being is more accurate.
Yeah.
In whom we move and live and have our being. That refers to the essential isness or amness. The essential isness of all things and the essential amness of all selves is the same infinite, indivisible being. And it's shared. Everything that exists is. Yes? The man's thoughts, they are. The man is. Everything that exists is. Isness, being is shared. That's what God is. Infinite, self-aware being. And the knowledge of infinite self-aware being shines in each of our minds as the knowledge I am, and it shines in the world as it is.
Yeah.
The isness of everything is God's being. So irrespective of whether you like the hunters or not, they are. Their are-ness, their isness is God's being. And it's got nothing to do with whether you like them or not, or whether you approve of their activities.
I didn't think I could uninvent them.
You can continue to dislike them.
Yeah.
You don't have to try to pretend that you like the rapist or the hunter or whatever it is. You can continue to have your personal preferences, but don't let your personal preferences prevent you from seeing that underneath your preferences there is this recognition that the isness of all people and things is the same shared being.
And the fact that I don't think, have been to any of your retreats, I didn't get a feeling that they would have had this information.
You have to be very careful saying things like that, Sheena. Do you remember you were here in the spring, and I said, it was in a meditation, I said, I'm sure nobody here watches professional boxing. It was in a meditation about bringing feelings close, and I was trying to draw attention to that moment in a boxing match when, in order to get some respite from their opponent, the boxer comes close.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? And they embrace each other. It's called a clinch. Anyway, I said, I'm sure none of you watch professional boxing. Do you remember there were 3 professional boxers on the retreat? So I learned then never to say, I'm sure there are no hunters here. I'm sure that amongst the people here, there are 2 or 3 people that like shooting pheasants.
I'm not really getting at the hunt. It was me. You've answered me anyway. It was about the veiling that happens.
Well, the veiling is because our personal preferences prevent us from seeing the isness of all things. Whether we think this vase is beautiful or ugly, it is. Take the most ugly appearance you can imagine. Whatever it is, it is. The isness of the ugly object and the isness of the beautiful object is the same. That isness is pure. It is not essentially qualified by the particular shape, the particular color, the particular size. Those are all added to the essential isness. And the experience of beauty is the revelation of that isness.
And coming on your retreats, I think, makes people more sensitive over the years.
Yes.
And therefore, and some of the questions have reflected it, when we go out into the world, it's actually quite painful, and that porousness that you talk about needs to be protected, doesn't it? Because actually, it's quite painful, preferential or not. You know, we choose to come here because we know that we like being, so it's quite painful going out into the world.
Yes, that's true. Just as we become more sensitive to our own suffering, normally it's only the really big events in our life that cause suffering. And the tiny events don't really register on the scale of suffering. But the more we spend time at a retreat such as this, the big events in our life, they tend to sort themselves out, but we get very, very sensitive to the tiniest feelings of separation. I had an incident just last week when I had an incident with my son where he, I told you about this, he by any standards transgressed reasonable behavior. I won't go into details on camera, but he transgressed big time. And in 2 or 3 different ways, all in the same. So I was furious with him, really furious with him, and let him know. But at one stage, I went too far. And I said something that I didn't actually mean. And he left and went home. He lives over the road with his mother. And I knew when he left that it was just 2 or 3 words. I had gone too far. My response was legitimate. I mean, it was my paternal duty to be furious with him. But nevertheless, I said one thing that I regretted, and I knew that I could see that it had gone right into his heart, and I regretted it. And it was very unusual. For 4 days, I think for 4 days after that, we didn't have any contact at all. Never in our life have we not had contact for 4 days. And I know that he had felt it, and I felt badly. So there was this tiny, it was 2 words, this tiny, tiny thing, this little separation between us. It was intolerable for me. It wasn't a big, many people wouldn't even have noticed it. It wouldn't even have registered because it was so small. But I felt this little, it was like a crack, and it was intolerable to me. Yeah.
It's like a litmus paper, just being stained so easily, isn't it? Did you put it right?
So then this was 4 or 5 days before coming here. So the day before I came here, we still hadn't spoken. And so I texted him and said, come on, Matt, let's go out and have a plate of pasta together. And we talked about it, and it was very nice. And as often happens, an incident like this, actually, it helps the relationship evolve. So it turned out fine in the end. But that was an example of how, after we spend time in a retreat like this, we become very sensitive, not only to our own suffering, not just the big events, but the tiny feelings of separation, but also to the same in other people. Situations, both in ourselves and in other people, that would once have been we wouldn't even have registered them. We would not have been that sensitive. But we become very sensitive to the slightest movement of ego.